The crown that bled you walk through the gates of a dead empire. Not dead like forgotten, dead like murdered. The air is heavy. Everything smells like dust, rust, and old prayers that were never answered. A royal crown lies on the floor ahead. It's not on a pedestal, not encased in velvet. It's cracked, bent, dripping blood. Not poetic blood. Fresh, red, sticky, and it hasn't stopped dripping. Behind it, a throne carved from black stone rises like a coffin nailed upright. You hear the wind howling through broken stained glass windows. It sounds like someone screaming, distant but real. Then it stops. Just gone. Like the soul of the place gave up. And it did. Because this isn't just a palace. This was the seat of a dynasty so powerful it ruled half the world. And so cursed, it destroyed itself from the inside out. Welcome to the Habsburg Empire, a name whispered through history like a spell gone wrong. For centuries, they wore the crown. Now, the crown wears them. You pass portraits lining the walls, each one painted with reverence, but they're grotesque. Elongated jaws, tiny, sunken eyes, faces that look human. Almost. One looks like it's about to speak. You keep walking. This is the story of how one family's thirst for power led to bloodlines twisted by inbreeding, madness, disease, and a king who couldn't eat, couldn't speak, couldn't rule, yet was the final breath of an empire that spanned continents. But we're not starting with him, that we're starting with a mother screaming in the dark. It's 1661. Spain. The royal palace is silent except for the shrieking echoes of a woman in labor. The queen is giving birth. Her skin is pale. Her lips blue. She's been in agony for 14 hours, and the court doctors have started praying. The child is born. But something's wrong. The nurses don't cheer. They whisper. One of them vomits. The baby is limp. His head is misshapen. His jaw juts forward unnaturally. He can't latch, can't cry, can barely open his eyes. This child is Charles II of Spain. He is the last of the Habsburgs, and he is already cursed. A body built to fail. Charles grows up inside a palace so vast it has its own weather. Outside, sunlight, parades, powdered wigs. Inside, silence and shadows. He doesn't walk until he's nearly 8. His legs are twisted, weak, like they were never meant to carry him. His tutors call him slow. His priests call him haunted. His mother calls him God's punishment. She never really looks at him. At night, he screams in his sleep. His bones hurt. His chest won't stop swelling. And sometimes he vomits blood. Doctors try everything. Leeches, mercury, boiled bats' wings mixed with wine. At one point, they carve symbols into his skin to let the demons out. All it lets out is blood. He cannot eat solid food. His jaw is so warped, he can't chew that he cannot speak properly. He mumbles, stutters, drools that he cannot produce children. His body is broken, inside and out. The court covers for him. They write glowing speeches, then have others deliver them in his name. They hire painters to correct his features in portraits. They bribe visiting nobles not to stare too long. But the world sees what he is, a symbol of a once great empire eating itself alive. Let's talk about the science. Charles wasn't born this way by random chance. His parents were uncle and niece. His grandparents were cousins. His great-grandparents? Also cousins. Every generation folded in on itself like a cursed origami. Modern scientists estimate Charles had more genetic overlap than the child of a brother and sister. Think about that. An emperor with more DNA in common with himself than with the rest of humanity. And still, he's made king. The war starts in his body, but it spreads to his court. Factions form. Assassins whisper. Noble families wait like vultures. Everyone knows Charles will die young. The only question is, when? And what will be left when he does? One night, during a royal dinner, he collapses, foaming at the mouth. His skin turns blue. The palace doctor runs in and screams for a priest. Someone else screams for a surgeon. A third man simply walks out, muttering, "It's beginning." They revive him, barely. But rumors explode. The king is dead. No, he's a demon. No, he's cursed. No, he is the curse. Soon after, a visiting ambassador writes, "The king's eyes do not move. His skin is wax. His body is present, but I am not convinced there is anything inside." He was 14. Behind closed doors, the royal court begins ritual exorcisms. They bring in monks to pray day and night. Holy water is flung. Latin chants echo through the palace. At one point, They try to exorcise his semen, believing his sterility is the work of Satan himself. No one speaks this out loud, but everyone is thinking it. The empire is not dying. It is already dead, and its corpse is still wearing a crown. The rotten court. The palace stinks. Not metaphorically, literally. The smell of rot, candle wax, human sweat, and something sour hides beneath the perfume. Servants whisper of mold growing behind the throne. The marble tiles sweat in the dark. You walk past a grand mirror. It's cracked, not from time, but from rage. A courtier threw a goblet at it last month when he saw Charles II's reflection and thought it was a ghost. It wasn't. The king is alive, but only technically. He stumbles through his daily rituals like a puppet, dresses in black, sits on the throne, drools, smiles on command, stares at nothing. When he speaks, the words come out slurred and wet. Half the court pretends to understand. The other half pretends not to hear. And while Charles's body decays, the real power plays unfold in the shadows. His mother, Mariana of Austria, has become a queen in all but name. She controls the court, the army, the treasury. But she's also terrified. Every noble, every priest, every diplomat is waiting, watching, for Charles to drop dead so the succession game can begin. Because here's the thing, Charles has no heir. He can't produce one, not even with 2 arranged royal marriages. Both ended in empty bedrooms and whisper campaigns about his impossible condition. The bloodline is ending. Everyone knows it. And every major European power, France, Austria, England, is already making moves to grab the crown before Charles dies. But let's not pretend the court is all politics and poison wine. There's something darker here, something unholy. One of Charles's handmaids dies in her sleep. Her body is found twisted, face locked in terror. No sign of violence, no illness. Her hands clutched something invisible. They say she whispered in her final breath. I saw it crawling out of his skin. Soon after, a palace monk writes in his diary. The king walks the halls at night, eyes open, barefoot, silent. He stops outside my door and stands there, breathing heavily. I have begun sleeping with a knife. Another entry, later, he didn't blink for 40 minutes. I timed it. In 1692, desperate for answers, the royal family calls upon a professional exorcist, Fray Marotenda, to purge the demons believed to be rotting Charles from within. This isn't metaphorical. The church sends full approval. Tenda arrives with relics, crosses, Latin scrolls, and 2 black-robed assistants. They conduct a midnight ritual in Charles's bedroom. Guards are posted outside. Candles drip onto bones laid in a circle. The king is tied down, his mouth stuffed with blessed cotton. What happens that night isn't recorded in full, but Tenda leaves the next morning pale and shaking. When asked what he saw, he replies, "He is not possessed. He is empty." The devil does not need to enter what has already been claimed. Charles doesn't speak for 3 days after the ritual. Then he suddenly demands that his father's body be exhumed. Yes, exhumed. Dug up. Unburied. Grave robbing and ghost kings you stand in the royal crypt. It's colder than death. The walls sweat black. The air tastes like iron. You shouldn't be here, but neither should the king. Charles II stands trembling beside his ministers, staring down into his father's coffin. Inside, the corpse of Philip IV lies withered, wrapped in decayed silk. Charles leans in. He wants to see the face. The priest protests. The bishop vomits. A servant faints. But Charles insists. They peel back the burial shroud. The smell hits like war. Charles leans even closer. Then he steps back and whispers, "I now understand why I am cursed." No one knows what he saw. But after that night, Charles begins ordering new investigations into witchcraft, sorcery, and hereditary corruption of the blood. He signs papers with shaking hands, demands new prayers, forbids mirrors in his room, refuses to eat for 3 days. Then he tries to walk into the royal chapel and collapses, vomiting bile across the altar. His body is failing fast now. He's 30, but looks 60. His hair falls out in patches. His eyes are yellow. His teeth loosen. His limbs twitch on their own. On one occasion, he starts bleeding from his nose, ears, and fingernails simultaneously. The doctors call it a humoral misalignment. A courtier calls it what everyone's thinking. The blood is trying to leave him. They burn his sheets, kill his dogs, bring in alchemists. One even suggests replacing Charles's blood entirely. A full transfusion using bull's blood and molten gold. That man is found hanging from the palace rafters a week later. No note, just a smile carved into his face. And still, the empire waits. Outside the palace, famine, rebellion, war. Spain's colonies are starving. Pirates raid the coasts. The royal treasury is empty. The army is a ghost. Inside the palace, fear, whispers, rot. Ministers write secret letters to France. Nobles begin preparing escape plans. Servants disappear in the night. And Charles? He just sits on his throne, motionless, staring at something only he can see. The betrayal in the walls. It's the year 1699. Charles II's body is now so ruined he can't walk without help. His skin bruises when touched. His memory flickers like a dying candle. Sometimes he forgets where he is. Other times he forgets who he is. One morning, he wakes up screaming because he believes he's been buried alive. But death? Death doesn't want him yet. It's like the curse wants him to rot in full view. And while Charles withers on the throne, a shadow begins to stretch across the Spanish Empire. The War of Spanish Succession is quietly being stitched together, one betrayal at a time. Because everyone wants a piece of the corpse. France wants the crown. Austria wants the colonies. England wants balance. The Vatican just wants this to be over, but Charles won't die. Behind closed doors, his advisors fight. Nobles switch sides weekly. Spies from every European power slip through the palace in plain sight. One servant finds a hidden letter sewn into the lining of a courtier's jacket. It reads, "Do not wait for the death. Accelerate it. The time of the blood has ended." The servant is never seen again. Charles begins to suspect that the people closest to him, the very ones holding him upright, are plotting to erase him. He bans his own mother from council meetings, orders the kitchens to prepare food only under priestly supervision, has his dogs poisoned, thinking they're messengers from hell, and he starts keeping a list, a small black notebook filled with names. People who look at him wrong, whisper too much, stand too close. He writes the list with fingers so gnarled he can barely hold the pen. At the top of the list, his own half-brother. Second, the Archbishop of Toledo. Third, the man in the mirror. By now, Charles weighs just over 70 pounds. His bones stick out like wire under paper. He can't eat, can't sleep, and one side of his face sags permanently. But still, he refuses to name a successor. That decision, or refusal, will drag all of Europe into a war that kills over 500,000 people. Because when a cursed king leaves an empty throne, everyone wants to sit on it. The Autopsy of a Curse. November 1st, 1700. The air over Madrid hangs like wet wool. The palace is silent at exactly midnight. Charles II, last of the Habsburgs, finally dies. There's no final word. No whispered prophecy. Just a sudden, eerie stillness, like a switch being flipped. One moment, he's groaning in his bed. The next, silence. A candle gutters. The dogs begin howling. One maid later swears she saw blood drip from the ceiling. His body is immediately locked in a cold chamber. But not for mourning. For dissection, the royal court needs answers. They want to understand what destroyed him. So, against tradition, Charles's body is autopsied by royal doctors, who document everything in a record that has been called the most disturbing medical account of a monarch ever written. What they find is not human. His heart is the size of a grain of pepper. His lungs are black with fluid. His intestines are rotted and gangrenous. His skull is filled with a watery gray substance, more like soup than brain. His testicles are shrunken, dry, and discolored. They conclude, this body had been dead for years before it stopped breathing. And in a final act of paranoia, his body is buried with a lead mask over the face, as if even in death, the curse might spread if someone looks too closely. But the real horror? Charles did name a successor, in secret. Weeks before his death, he signed a will, naming Philip of Anjou, grandson of the French King Louis XIV, as his heir. This single sentence becomes the match that lights a continental war. I leave all my kingdoms, without exception, to the Duke of Anjou. Boom. Just like that, the balance of power explodes. France celebrates. Too soon. Austria screams treason. England panics. The Vatican goes silent. Spain splits. A civil war brews in Madrid before Charles's body is even cold. The Habsburg Empire is dead. But its blood, spills into every corner of Europe. And here's the kicker. The curse doesn't end with Charles. It spreads. His genetic legacy survives in other European houses. Marriages arranged decades before come back like echoes, and over the next century, more kings are born with deformities, madness, stillbirths, infertility. The Habsburg jaw, still visible in portraits well into the 1800s, the dynasty, reduced to broken lineages and powdered wigs. The empire, torn apart, brick by bloody brick, in a century of war. And yet, deep in the royal crypt beneath Madrid, they say Charles still rests, mask intact, bones twisted, fingers curled into fists. Some say if you stand over his tomb on All Souls' Day, you can hear him mutter, "I was the king, but I was never alive." The empire devours itself. It starts like a low growl that by the time Charles II is buried, the ink on his will is already starting wars. Philip of Anjou is crowned King Philip V of Spain in 1700, and it's like throwing a match into a powder keg soaked in royal paranoia. Austria explodes first. The Habsburgs there, Charles's other bloodline, claim the throne was theirs all along. England and the Dutch Republic panic. France gets cocky. Spain splits in half. Boom. The War of the Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, begins, and it's absolute chaos. Imagine Europe as a massive, rotting chessboard, France and Spain on one side, trying to unite the Bourbon dynasty under one mega-empire. England, Austria, the Dutch, and half of Europe on the other, screaming, nope, because that would make France way too powerful. Armies marching in circles, switching sides, leaving towns in ruins. Villages burned to the ground for the sake of a crown no one truly wants to wear. This war is brutal, and all of it, because one sickly monarch died childless and left a cursed, inbred legacy behind. But let's zoom back into Spain. In Madrid, people are starving. The royal treasury, already empty, is bled dry. Churches melt down gold chalices to fund the army. The people blame witches. They burn a woman alive in the Plaza Mayor after she dreams of Charles's ghost. Meanwhile, Philip V, the new king, begins to unravel. He's not cursed in the same way, but the blood is still there. The inbreeding, the madness, it echoes. Philip starts talking to mirrors. He refuses to change clothes for months at a time. He develops what modern psychiatrists call clinical lycanthropy. He believes he's turning into a beast that he chews on furniture. Wakes up screaming. Demands his dead grandfather's bones be brought to him for advice. And yet, the war continues. In 1707, in the Battle of Almansa, 20,000 soldiers die on Spanish soil. The land is soaked in blood. Peasants run. Children disappear. Wolves return to the countryside. And still, nobody wins. Not really. Just corpses. Dust. A throne that becomes heavier by the year. The ghost in the bloodline. By 1714, the war finally ends, but not with victory. Just exhaustion. The Treaty of Utrecht is signed. Spain keeps its throne, but loses massive chunks of its empire. Austria and England grab territory like vultures. France backs off, bruised and broke. And Philip V? He keeps the Spanish crown, but he is not okay. This is where the curse evolves, like a virus. Let's rewind a sec. You remember how Charles II's autopsy showed his body was basically liquefying from the inside? That wasn't just bad luck. That was 300 years of incest catching up at once. Now, that same blood flows in Philip's veins. Not as strong, but it's there, mutating. Historians try to explain it away. Mental illness, genetic fragility, pressure of kingship. But when you line up the portraits, when you read the diaries, when you see how 4 generations of monarchs spiral into madness, obsession, depression, hallucinations, it starts to feel like something more. Philip V abdicates the throne in 1724, says he's too unstable to rule. His son Louis I takes over. He dies of smallpox 7 months later. Philip retakes the throne, goes full recluse, refuses to see people, starts whispering to paintings. At one point, he believes he's already dead and just haunting the palace. He begins sleeping in coffins. He demands priests exorcise the royal bedchambers every single night. His letters become incomprehensible, filled with dark imagery, circular logic, and obsessive prayers. By the time he finally dies in 1746, his reign has left the Spanish crown fractured, weak, and crawling with French influence. The Bourbons rule Spain now. But the Habsburg ghost? It never left. You can still see it in the tapestries, in the eyes of the royals, in the way the palace mirrors are always covered during storms. Because even though the bloodline technically changed, the curse just switched hosts. And here's where it gets really weird. In the 1990s, a group of Spanish researchers and historians exhumed DNA records from royal burial sites. They study the Habsburg family tree, genetic traits, skull shapes, and marriage patterns. What they find is wild. Charles II had more genetic similarity to himself than most people do with their own siblings. His family tree isn't a tree at all, that it's a circle, a loop, a genetic Ouroboros, eating itself for centuries. One researcher called it the most extreme example of royal inbreeding in European history. The Forbidden Room. Deep beneath the El Escorial Monastery Palace, west of Madrid, there's a chamber not open to the public. Even royal visitors need special permission to enter. It's called La Crypta Real, the Royal Crypt. Inside, 26 marble tombs, stacked like drawers in the walls. Each tomb holds the remains of Spanish kings and queens, and their cursed bloodlines. But what no tourist sees is the second level. Beneath the tombs, beneath the stone, lies a sealed-off vault known only by whispers. El Pudridero, the rotting room. Let that name sit for a second. This is the actual room where the dead bodies of Spanish royalty are left to decompose before being transferred to their official sarcophagi upstairs. Yes, they rot them first. For years, it's like a medieval horror waiting room. Corpses are laid on marble slabs, sealed away, left to decay, sometimes for 30 years. The goal? Wait until the body is reduced to just bones, pure, clean, uncursed bone, before it can join the rest of the royal lineage upstairs. And Charles II? He was the last Habsburg to be placed there. But here's the twist. No one has seen his bones. No photos. No public records. No confirmation. Just silence. Some historians think the body was too decayed to be preserved. Others think he was buried elsewhere entirely. A few? They believe he still hasn't decomposed. They say that when priests went to open his vault, they heard whispering, a scratching sound, like fingernails on stone. And they locked the vault forever. A royal archivist wrote in a confidential note. Discovered in the 1940s, there is one among the dead who will not turn to dust. We dare not name him. Now here's where we veer from creepy into full-on Gothic thriller. There are rumors, unconfirmed, but chilling, that a special team from the Spanish monarchy still inspects the crypt once a year. The inspection is done in total secrecy. No records, no lights, just candles, just priests. One supposed witness claimed the team was instructed, if you hear breathing, do not speak. The curse evolves. Let's step out of the dark and into the cold light of science, because it gets even creepier when modern genetics gets involved. In 2009, researchers published a study analyzing the inbreeding coefficient of the Habsburgs. Turns out, Charles II had an inbreeding coefficient of over 0.25, which is the equivalent of being the child of a brother and sister. That's not an exaggeration. That's math. That's genetics folding in on itself like a cursed origami. But what shocked historians was this. The Habsburgs didn't just marry cousins. They married uncle to niece. Double cousins. In some cases, first cousins from both parents. Their entire family tree is a spiderweb of doomed loops. By the time Charles was born, it's a miracle he could breathe at all. But here's the kicker. It didn't stop there. The Habsburg blood didn't die. It spread because these royal families, they married into other royal dynasties, including the Bourbons of France, the Saxe-Coburgs of England, even the Romanovs of Russia, which means the cursed Habsburg bloodline is still in the veins of some royal descendants today. Let that sink in. In 2018, a British medical historian published an eerie theory that mental illness, depression, and autoimmune diseases that appear in certain modern monarchs might be residual effects of long-ignored genetic damage. That he cited multiple cases of royals showing facial asymmetry, speech disorder, anxiety, paranoia, and chronic depression. Reproductive issues across generations. One unnamed modern European noble, believed to be descended from the Habsburgs, was described as chronically paranoid, infertile, and terrified of mirrors. You want more? In 2011, a research team working on early genomic reconstructions of European aristocracy discovered anomalies in a preserved lock of royal hair. allegedly tied to Philip V. It carried markers of mutated recessive genes tied to mental breakdowns and neurodegenerative conditions, but in a pattern that shouldn't be possible from just one generation. The team didn't publish the full results. They cited respect for tradition. Translation? This bloodline might still be dangerous. So what are we left with? An empire that rotted from the inside out. A monarch who couldn't die until history fell apart. A crypt that still holds his secrets. And a legacy that might be quietly unraveling royal sanity today. The empire that died screaming. You'd think the Spanish Empire would have gone quietly. Nah, it goes down screaming, in fire, madness, and royal rotb by the 1800s. The once glorious empire built on gold and blood is coughing up colonies like phlegm. The Americas? Gone. The Philippines? Rebellious. Napoleon shows up and yoinks the Spanish throne like it's a party hat. Spain spends a century and a half in political whiplash. Kings crowned and dethroned like contestants on a cursed game show. Civil wars. Assassinations. Entire governments collapse mid-sentence. Meanwhile, the descendants of Philip V, the ones with that sweet, cursed blood, keep ruling. And they keep breaking. Let's talk Isabella II, mid-1800s, but she's descended from Philip V. She's 13 when she's forced onto the throne. She's married off to her own cousin, who may or may not be gay, and who definitely isn't into her. Rumors swirl that she had multiple lovers, none of them royal. That her children? Probably not her husbands. That she talked to portraits at night, especially ones of Charles II. Her reign is a disaster. Spain basically mutinies against her, and she's forced into exile in Paris. She spends her final years obsessed with psychics and ghost sightings in her French manor. She dies clutching a Habsburg family medallion, and no one knows where it went. Then there's Alfonso XIII, born in 1886. Also a Bourbon, still rocking the cursed Habsburg genetic leftovers. He's paranoid, obsessive, thinks someone is always watching him. He orders secret tunnels be built beneath the royal palace. He has nightmares about his ancestors. One guard writes that Alfonso would sometimes whisper in dead languages while walking in circles. During World War I, he develops a weird hobby, collecting letters from doomed soldiers. He reads them out loud, at night, alone. That he eventually flees Spain too. Dies alone, broke, haunted. Spain becomes a republic, then a dictatorship, then a democracy. But the bloodline? It still lingers, just diluted, sleeping. Maybe. The final echo. Here's where your audience leans forward, like, oh damn, what's happening now? We zoom to present day, and here's what nobody talks about. The current Spanish royal family, yes, the ones still in power, are direct descendants of the cursed bloodline. King Felipe VI, directly descended from Philip V, which means Charles II's twisted genes are still floating in his bloodstream. And while the line is far less inbred today, there have been whispers. Felipe's father, Juan Carlos I, abdicated suddenly in 2014 amid scandal and erratic behavior. He fled the country, lives in exile, avoids mirrors, has been seen talking to himself in public. He once told a journalist, "The crown is not made of gold. It is made of ghosts." They laughed. He didn't tee there's a final thread here, and it's chilling. In 2022, during renovations of the royal palace, workers unearthed a sealed room beneath the West Wing. Inside, 16th century frescoes to a locked wooden box, unmarked, faint writing on the wall in Latin. Sanguis regum. Manus Dei. Blood of Kings. Hand of God. The box was taken away by military officials. No public statement followed, but a leaked memo. It said the room had been sealed since the reign of Charles II. And that's where we leave the present, with silence and shadows. Drop of blood. Final note to the viewer. You step away from the mirror. The candle flickers. You think of crowns and blood and the terrible price of legacy. Somewhere, deep in the stone of a forgotten palace, a bone stirs. And if you listen closely, you might hear him breathing. The royal bloodline, so cursed it destroyed an empire, was never just a story about the past. It's still alive, somewhere, waiting.